Hi everyone, this is Laura Lowell, and I'd like to welcome you to another 42 Rules webcast. We're very excited this year to be introducing our second editions and updating all of our webcasts. And I'm especially excited to welcome Lilia Shirman, the author of 42 Rules for Growing Enterprise Revenue. I'm really proud to introduce Lilia to you. She is a management consultant who focuses on helping customers get the most out of their existing business model. She's also managing director at Golden Seeds, and they are a nationwide investor network that supports female leaders and entrepreneurs. She's also involved at Stanford and has had past lives, to use her words, at BEA, Accenture, and Applied Materials. And before we jump in, Lilia, and let you tell us all about the 42 Rules of Growing Enterprise Revenue, I want to let our listeners know that you can pose questions to Lilia throughout the webcast. Just use the questions tab on the control panel, and we will try to answer them throughout the presentation, and we're going to leave some time at the end as well. So feel free to ask questions. So Lilia, welcome to the webcast. And I'd like to start off by asking, so what are the rules?
Thanks, Laura. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. So, you know, when I started writing this book, what I realized was that even though the idea of customer-centric business has been around for probably a couple of decades, a lot of businesses, both big and small, are still having a lot of trouble figuring out how to really convince customers that what they offer is really relevant, that it really matters to the customer's main concern. So that's really what the book is about. And in writing it, what I did was I went and I talked to executives at companies like Citrix and Cisco and IBM and Salesforce, and you know, looked back at the work we'd done at customers like CA, VMware, EMC, and really gathered strategies that those companies were using to prove to customers that what they were doing for them mattered and had significant, tangible, unique value. So let's talk about those 7 strategies. Each one of them really requires a mindset change. So the first one is in the way we pick markets before we ever interact with a customer. You know, a lot of business cases for going into any particular market focus on the market opportunity, and that's really important. But just as important is what I call the ability to execute, the ability to succeed in delivering value to customers. And it's the balance of both of those that's critical, really as a foundation for any success in being relevant to your target customers. The second is around focusing on where value comes from. A lot of companies still pitch functions or capabilities of products, what really, as well as sort of thinking internally about their own organization and the different ways that different parts of their organization serve customers independently. What I encourage companies to do is turn all of that around and think about the interactions that customers have with your company all throughout their life cycle and the full context within which customers are using products and applying the features or capabilities of whatever you're offering to them. Of course, you know, sales and marketing, traditional sales and marketing is aging. And with new technologies now available, there's a lot more opportunities for collaboration, not just in social media, but in a lot of other aspects of sales and marketing. Companies are moving from products to solutions, and I'll talk further about what a solution really means. They're looking more vertically at the industries within which their customers are living. And finally, rather than just training their channels on products, they're really empowering them to do a lot more and to be more collaborative and interactive with customers so that they can really articulate value and relevance. So let's dive into each one of these a little bit farther. So first of all, pursuing markets where you matter. What do I mean by balancing opportunity and ability? Opportunity is, I think, pretty obvious to all the folks here. These are all the standard reports, analytics, market sizing, spend forecast. Ability has a lot of dimensions to it. This is ability to sell, to go to market, to meet customer needs, to form relationships with other companies that fill in needs that you may not meet. It's the ability to be relevant and deliver value to customers. And so when selecting markets, you really have to balance the two to end up in a situation where you can be relevant. The other viewpoint that is very common because it helps us manage our companies and operate is this organizational chart, right? I'm in sales and what I do is sell, and I'm in support and what I do is answer the phone. But when the customer looks from their perspective, they're not looking at it from our organizational structure. They couldn't care less. What they're focused on is all the things that they have to do to figure out which product to purchase, how to get it working and in place, how to get the most people to use it and get the most value out of it, how to interact with your company through all the contractual, legal, and financial types of transactions. And a lot of these interactions, in fact, I'd say probably all of them, involve more than one functional group within your company. So this mindset shift is extremely important in designing interactions that are that fit with what the customer is looking for rather than fit with your org structure. So let's talk about context a little more because I mentioned on the previous slide this customer view. And when you hear most vendors present, the part of context that they talk about in order to just gain credibility is they talk about the industry and the pressures and Porter's five forces and competition and where the company is. And those are things that are publicly available, readily available information. You need to articulate it in order to, be invited to the table. But it's not enough. What really allows us to communicate to a customer that what we do matters are the things under the surface, the things that are harder to figure out, but that really create a unique value proposition and a unique message. And those are what I call use cases and people. So let me explain each of those a little more. What is a use case? Fundamentally, it is the situation within which your product or service is being used by the company. So it may include multiple scenarios, multiple organizations, multiple business processes and systems, and is meant to serve a bigger company objective. So the example I like to use is actually a very simple one. Let's take a screw. You can go to the hardware store, pay $1, maybe 50 cents. I haven't been there for a while. And you'll have a screw that holds things together, for example, a doorknob to the door. You take a very similar screw, perhaps with a different material, different manufacturing process, more strengthening, and that screw is going to cost you a lot more if what you're doing with it is holding an airplane wing in place. So it's not the manufacturing process of the material of this tiny object that determines its value. What determines its value is the use case specifically, and what role this object or this product plays within that use case. Obviously, if you're picking markets, you're going for a high margin situation, you want to be selling to the airliners and not through Home Depot necessarily. The people side, I love the sign. I came across it recently when I was at, you may be surprised or not so surprised, at Facebook, just on a wall in one of their buildings. And I love it because it really talks to this concept that rather than simply categorizing people into categories, we have the financial buyer, the technical buyer, the user, they're really talking about a multi-dimensional real person. And when we're designing messages and sales strategies and marketing interactions, we really have to realize that when we think about what we deliver and when we think about what the customer's world looks like, they might be really different. And it's only, sorry about that, it's only in that interaction and where the two can come together that you get value, right? So what the customer is thinking about is not so much the features and performance of your product. They're really concerned about what they've promised their boss, or when their next promotion is going to happen, or whether their job is going to be on the line. So again, bringing those two together is where value happens. So let's talk about.
Lilia, we have a question from one of our viewers, and I wanted to share that with you. So the question is, I think on the previous slide, when you're creating value propositions, how do you actually incorporate the use case and the people-specific concerns?
Sure. So there's several ways. So the use case I see, and we've used this a lot with clients, it's really the connecting point between those big business objectives that everybody talks about, like increasing revenue and saving costs, that everybody talks about, and so they sound generic on the one hand. And then the nitty-gritty details of what your product actually does. The use case sits in between those. If you can understand the details of how the specific capabilities that the functions of your product enable connect to those big business objectives, then you can relate a very believable, credible story about where the value really comes from. And so that goes to credibility, goes to believability, and it goes to relevance. Because you're not talking in general business terms, you're talking about a very specific use case from the customer's perspective. The people side, there's a popular practice now of creating these personas or audiences, right? You give them a name, you define what their role is in the target organization and what they like to do, what they care about. That's a part of how the people aspect is incorporated into messaging. The other way is really in terms of skills training for your sales force and your channel partners in engaging and interactively collaborating with customers, remembering that they're people and not just some theoretically defined audience. Okay, so onwards to collaboration. So a lot of traditional marketing and sales activities are very push-based. In other words, we create a message, we push it out into the marketplace. We create a presentation, we put a salesperson up in front of a room and have them talk to it. We go to a trade show and we present, we hand out collateral. I would argue that even putting aside the modern interactive mediums like social media, even these more traditional types of sales and marketing activities can become very collaborative and interactive. I'll give you a couple of examples. Messaging. The thing that sort of amazes me most, I think, still as I work with clients is how many marketing teams create messaging by sitting a bunch of internal people in a room and brainstorming the messages. When customers are out there happy to share feedback and information about the value they've really found in your product. So get out there, talk to customers, listen to their language, listen to what they're really saying, because that's a much more credible story than anything your marketers will make up when sitting in a room. Same thing with collateral. Consider creating a wiki, a moderated wiki where customers can come in and create product data sheets or white papers together. It's more credible, it's more accurate, it's more engaging. Websites, we hide support and feedback down way in that, fine text in the bottom of the page. Put it right up on the product sites. Give people the product pages. Give people an opportunity to ask questions right as they're consuming the information. So there's a lot of ways, sales meetings. Don't give the salesperson a presentation the first time they're out there. Teach them to do a whiteboard talk. Make them ask questions as part of that talk. Every one of these is an opportunity to collaborate with the customer and really draw them into a conversation. Solutions and products. This is a subject that comes up a lot. You've been selling products for a while. You're realizing that they're becoming commoditized. You want to offer a broader value to customers. And so teams at companies look at, let's offer a solution. So what's the difference? When I think of a solution, I think of it as a much more blended set of products, services, and also expertise. And blended, I don't mean that you sell a product and then maybe if the salesperson isn't too concerned about extending the sales process, they throw in a service or two. I'm talking about something that's really integrated, both inside your company and with partners. Now, the big difference, even bigger than what I just described, is the why. The solution is designed to address a much bigger, broader need. It's the imperative that really drove the customer to allocate budget rather than a requirement to perform a specific task. And then finally, another huge difference is the success factor. How do you deliver value through a product versus a solution? Products have to perform well. They have to have all the right features, be easy to own. Whereas solutions, yes, all those things are still true for the components, but there's a lot of value that comes from integration of the different solution components, clear roles among the solution participants if you're working with partners, adaptability to evolve over time, and usually require that the customer themselves change certain behaviors. So that means a lot of education and collaboration in putting the solution in place. Closely related to solution is the idea of taking a product that is fundamentally horizontal and making it relevant to individual industries that your customers live in. And this data is from a study that the Shirman Group did of about 125 B2B vendors. And one of the questions we asked was, what kind of results have you seen in these three key indicators, three key metrics, after putting a verticalization initiative in place? And the results were frankly astounding. I mean, we've been doing verticalization with clients. We know that it's beneficial, but we didn't realize just how significant the benefits were. So even with new programs that have been in place with less than 2 years, you see that leads, brand awareness, and revenue all shoot up by approximately 50%. And after 2 years, the results are even more phenomenal. I think this is something that requires a lot of resources, but can be done in stages. And I would really encourage you to look at where concentrations of customers live in terms of industries and start to focus more on how to be relevant to their environment and the industry that they're living in.
Lilia, we got another question that I think is super relevant to this topic. And it's in response to kind of going vertical. The question is that reorganizing by industry can be really expensive. And would you recommend doing this for companies with more limited resources? Or how would you recommend, if a company has more limited resources, how would you recommend going about that?
That's a really good question, and absolutely correct. Verticalization costs money. It takes a lot of investment in subject matter expertise, in training, in content development, but you don't have to do it all at once. So if you're a smaller company or a company that just isn't in position to invest, the first thing I would say is, well, even if you have a lot of resources, don't go after 10 industries at once. Pick one or two where you think the greatest opportunity and ability to execute lie. And you don't have to reorganize and start building industry-specific products. You can begin simply by really getting to understand the industry-specific needs and back to context, the context of that industry for your customers, and how what you're offering relates to that particular environment. You can start to do simple sales and marketing changes that are going to be able to articulate value to that industry better. And that's not as big an investment as some of the later stages where you're assigning salespeople to specialize in only one industry, where you're starting to actually develop products that are customized to each industry, or create whole service offerings. There are ways to start small, and I would encourage everybody to do that. Okay, so sales channels. So this is the traditional set of training that we see a lot of companies doing for their salespeople, right? You train them in the products and new features. These are the launches and releases coming out. We a lot of time spent on sales process, the different stages, whether your company has 6 or 9, or whether it's solution selling, which frankly in a lot of places is just another form of sales process. It's okay, this is useful information, but there was a really interesting study done by Rain Today that they talked to B2B buyers, and they said, what are your top complaints? So the number 1 complaint was salespeople don't listen. Number 2 was they don't understand my environment and what it is I need, and they haven't been able to convince me of value. Most of this training wouldn't help a salesperson address those complaints. So I would look at a much broader set of ways to empower your sales channel. Yes, products and solutions, buying process, much more important than your internal sales process, really, because it's that perspective of the customer that we talked about earlier. Use cases and industries. This is what enables a salesperson to articulate value, not intimate knowledge of the product. Skill development, listening skills, interviewing skills, negotiation skills that build the relationship rather than potentially damage it. And think about the role of the people you're training. Role-based training is absolutely critical. Your sales managers have a very different need than inside sales, than sales reps, than channel partners, and think more broadly than just the people with the sales title with sales in their title. People who work trade shows, people who staff events or provide support or interact with customers in any way, even your accounts receivable department. If they touch a customer, they are a channel. And they need role-based training to understand how to do their job in a way that is relevant and fits with what the customer needs. So let me summarize this. Here are the 7. Look at markets where you can deliver value and execute, as well as markets that are growing. Look at the interactions from the customer's point of view. Consider the complete context within which customers are making their decisions. Look for opportunities to collaborate in every single sales, marketing, and post-sales interaction that you have. Consider more holistic solutions and teaming up with other companies to deliver those. Look at the world in which your customers live, which is their industry, not yours. And finally, make sure that where the rubber hits the road, which is in your sales channel, that channel is able to communicate that relevance and demonstrate the value. And that's all I have today. Thank you very much.
Excellent. We have a couple more questions if you have time, Lilia.
Sure.
Okay, so David wants to know, can you give examples of customers who've been using the use case concept in practice?
Absolutely. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So one that comes to mind is EMC. They are developing, their software division has recently made a huge shift from very product-centric go-to-market to looking at industries and use cases within those industries. So for example, in life sciences, They are, what they do is information management and records management. And obviously there's a big relevance to that in life sciences, but if you just said records management for life sciences, that would still be a really broad area, and it would be difficult to get into the specifics of what it is they're impacting. So they're taking very specific situations within life sciences, quality management within the manufacturing environment, the management of documents during medical trials, and they're creating solutions and messages around each one of those. They're all interrelated. It's not like a separate product for each one. They're leveraging a lot across to keep costs down, but they're really using those use cases to be very specific and relevant to the day-to-day of what customers are encountering. The other example is from a couple of years ago. We were working with CA, and they were looking at going to market into the telecommunications industry because they saw a big opportunity there. And they wanted to demonstrate how a particular product set was relevant to telecommunications. Now, telecommunications, as you all know, is a huge industry, extremely complex, many different pieces. So we worked with them to really identify the most critical use cases where their products were being used the most and delivering the most value. And so they identify things like service delivery management and customer self-service and a couple of others, and really focused in on those specific solutions to design their campaigns and messaging and sales efforts around. And they were able to, I think within 2 quarters, they doubled, their sales force came in, I think, at double quota when they switched over to this use case approach. So very effective.
Amazing, actually. So we have one more question, and then
Yeah.
I think we'll wrap it up. So the question is, if you can only do one of the 7 strategies, where would you start?
That's
a $1 million question, isn't it?
That's a $1 million question. So assuming that you're already in a market, and so you don't have the luxury of stepping back necessarily and rethinking that, probably the low-hanging fruit here, the easiest thing, is to look at the context, the use cases and people. The other reason it's a kind of low-hanging fruit is because it's something that doesn't require a company-wide shift, right? Some of these others you really need to work over time with other organizations in your company. The use case approach and the sort of looking at the people who are making decisions and interacting with your company is something that can start in a sort of contained and manageable way, and yet creates a lot of impact in terms of being able to demonstrate how you're relevant and why what you're offering really matters to what the customer cares about. So that's probably where I would start, is figuring out which use cases and which use cases you're most relevant for, and how to engage with the people who are involved in those.
I think that's great advice, just like the other 42 rules in your book. So I want to thank you for taking your time. All of Lilia's contact information is up on the screen. I do want to encourage you to go online and get your copy of the 2nd edition if you don't already have one. Obviously, you can get it at Amazon.com, or if you go directly to 42rules.com, our publisher is offering a 15% discount for direct purchases. So feel free to pop on over to 42rules.com or reach out to Lilia, chat with her on Twitter, email, visit the website, or her great blog, Revenue Orchard. I want to thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you on another 42 Rules webcast. Thanks so much, everybody.